All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Day in the Life. Today, I'm joined by my friend Natasha, who is a product designer. And Natasha and I both met, we met while we both worked at IBM, but now Natasha is working at Atlassian, still as a product designer. And I'm super excited to catch up with her about how all of that is going. Welcome, Natasha.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
Yeah. So, my first question is just around how did you get in design in the first place?
Let's see if I can wrap that answer up in 10 minutes. So yeah, illustration was how I channeled my creativity first since I was a kid. I never really stopped drawing. So then I wanted to pursue it. So I attended art school and I majored in illustration, which doesn't sound very promising at all. But thankfully, it was very versatile. I was allowed to like take graphic design classes, motion graphics, and then I was trying. So yeah, at that moment, I was trying to figure out like what I wanted to do in art or design. In all these different design classes, I'm basically learning the same thing: how to tell a story with different mediums and tools. But for some reason, I wasn't 100% satisfied. So until every semester, some big company comes to our school and builds this a course around a problem that they challenge students to solve for them. So I was curious about this type of challenge and it would look really good on my resume. So I applied and enrolled for this product design course hosted by Adidas. They accepted 14 students to help them define the future of athleisure wearables. This class taught me the value of user research, user testing, empathy, and working with budget constraints and much more. So we use these attributes to tell a story and solve a problem. I ended up standing out in the class thanks to my illustration background. That skill really helped visually craft a story. Anyways, I built this sports bra prototype and Adidas ended up buying the IP from me. That was the moment where I was like, ooh, I think I could be a product designer.
That's really cool. I didn't know that. And I mean, I have seen your illustrations firsthand on the projects we've worked on, and they definitely are very talented. Do you miss doing illustration, or are you finding ways to incorporate that?
I one day I was like cleaning up my closet and I found a bunch of oil paintings and illustrations from those classes when I wanted to be an illustrator. And I was like, wow, it's kind of a shame I don't do that stuff anymore. And because yeah, that was like my bread and butter at one point, and I miss it after seeing that. So I'd love to get back into it one day.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll figure out a way somehow. And it does come in handy in certain roles, like when you're trying to do a storyboard or just like illustrate a concept. I mean, you've definitely like been able to pull it in certain ways, at least at IBM you did.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah. So one question just for our listeners, how would you describe the role of a product designer?
Ooh, great question. So I bet people would disagree with me, but this is my take on it. Product designers solve problems based on user needs and business needs. Um, for example, DoorDash is a very successful product. Not probably not the best example, but the first thing I see, for example, on my homepage for DoorDash are top rated restaurants within my proximity. I believe this was a user need and business decision made by their design team because one, consumers mostly care about the restaurants that can offer delivery service. So they have to be within the 5 mile radius. Two, by making these recommendations most discoverable and accessible, there's a high chance that consumers will order from these establishments, supporting local businesses and giving DoorDash their cut too.
Yeah. So, and you're saying that is like specific to product versus like, I mean, I guess my question is kind of around like, well, what was like the difference between calling yourself a product designer and a user experience designer?
Yes. Okay. Now this is where I think it's more subjective. So is there a difference between product design and user experience designer? Technically, yes. Based on my own experience and going through lots of interviews though for both titles, I'm starting to think that UX design is evolving and maturing into product design. Product designers are technically considered more full stack. They're expected to execute end-to-end experiences, so they need to be well versed in aligning product strategy to the business vision, then connecting that to tangible designs. whereas UX designers are supposedly not as concerned about integrating business decisions or constraints into their designs. But I don't think that's true anymore. After talking to many companies, the expectations for the role of UX design and product were the same. If you're not connecting your deliverables to any OKR or KPI, then are you even solving a problem?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So, yeah, could you just talk about like what the differences between working at Atlassian and IBM have been? And maybe I'd also be interested if you could talk about like what you saw from your job application process too, like how you feel like there's just like the differences out there between companies.
Okay, it kind of sounds like there's two questions here. So the first
Yeah.
one is, what are some of the differences between Atlassian versus IBM?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll answer that one first. So a couple of big takeaways. There's a lot of differences, but first one is having a clear business goal and keeping track of our success metrics. So when a company has grown so large and it has been around for so long, that vision or mission becomes what's next. The outcome of that is creating new features and new products to keep up with competitors when really your customers just want you to fix what's broken. So that's not a sustainable business model. My first 2 days at Atlassian, I already know what the company is trying to achieve for year 2021 to 2022 and how I can contribute and make an impact within my team. So that's one. Second, having customer success stories and meeting quarterly goals. Our town hall meetings have been exciting to say the least. I just see a bunch of line charts of revenue, subscriptions, active users just flying higher and higher. In addition to that, testimonials from large customers like NASA, Lucid Motors, or Netflix. Actually, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to name them, but talking about how much people love our products. Hearing these things make me feel really proud of working here. Now, getting to the design process, we spend a lot of time in discovery and define phase, aka the product strategy phase. So one thing when we were doing kind of like the waterfall process at IBM, what was missing was we did not connect design iterations back to user stories. So at IBM, we constantly had requirements changing, but we never stopped to wonder, how do these new requirements tie into the original problem we're trying to solve? And how do they connect to our user stories? I know we had user stories, but they were just forgotten about. Anyways, if you don't ask these questions, then you're enabling scope creep.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. And I'm curious to just like, I mean, I know a job interview is very high level and you can't really see what the culture's like, but I know that when you were looking at, transitioning to another company, you did a lot of job interviews. And so what were some of the things you were looking at with these, or what were some of the things that I guess about these other companies that appealed to you or stood out to you?
I think the brand image, the brand image, which kind of aligns with the brand culture too. The product that they're selling and the product I would be working on, the team, when you're being interviewed, those interviewers are most likely going to be the people you're working with. So they have to put a really good impression on you. Yeah, so those are like key things I was looking at. And of course, compensation. Who isn't?
Yeah. Um, this is kind of, I don't know, maybe a weird question, but I feel like compensation is one of those tricky areas. And so what were some of the things you did to like determine your worth and negotiate for what you wanted, or if you did that?
Yeah, good question. It just required some research. There's a lot of resources now online, like levels.fyi, the link that Ivy sent us, Glassdoor, and being transparent with your coworkers, friends about their wage too, if they're comfortable with sharing. Yeah, like gathering those numbers yourself was a good way for me to kind of give them a ballpark when they ask. But I've had situations where I give a range, but then their offer exceeded that range completely. So now, or do they think that I don't know my own value, but then every company kind of has their own standard for how much this level should get paid. So I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, oh, they actually offered me more than what I wanted. So does that mean I should have been asking for more at other companies?
Right. So even when I increased my value, of course, you're still going to have companies that say, oh, that's way over our budget. So I guess you really got to know like who you're talking to, you know?
Yeah. And then I guess sometimes I guess, have to think about, is it the compensation that I want, or is it a certain type of experience that I want? So yeah, like, do you weigh that, like thinking about, okay, would I rather work at this company that pays this much money, or would I rather work at this company because I'm getting this other type of experience?
Oh man, yeah, that was a really tough one. I had an opportunity to do like consumer facing work that I was really interested in, but obviously it's a startup environment, so the compensation wouldn't be as high. So I think a mentor of mine has told me like you have to really weigh, um, does the new compensation affect your like the comfort of your lifestyle now? And is that important to you? Are you going to have to make cuts? Are you going to have to change your spending habits and the way you live? And if that's going to be a problem, which to me is a problem, then it's kind of a red flag. Um, and another mentor, when I was also making these decisions of like multiple offers, I had a really good mentor also say like, hey, you gotta kind of weigh, what do you think, like, and reflect on your previous job, like what do you think you were missing from that previous job? you know is is it growth? Are you missing like the process driven part of it, the methodologies? Are you strong? Are you confident in that area of product design? Do you, and the answer is no. I think that was what I needed to improve on. So will these new companies satisfy that? Because they made me realize of that growth where I was lacking as a designer is probably the most important thing I should be looking for in that company. And Atlassian was pretty known for system thinking and being very process driven, so that was a no brainer.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you found such a good fit for you.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'd like to talk about just what a day in the life is like for you. I know it's like a new company and things have changed, but just like kind of what a day in the life is like for you at Atlassian. What do you do?
So Atlassian is an Australian company, so most of my coworkers and team are in Australia. So we are still figuring out the time zones. My meetings every day are 3 to 5 or 6 p.m. because that's when Australia wakes up. So from like 9 a.m. to 3, it's just heads down work, which is really nice. Um, and because of the time zones, I don't really have like a lot like meetings back and forth from 9 to 5. Maybe that'll change, but right now it's just like focus, heads down time during the day, then meeting with Australia during the afternoon to evening. Um, their their Fridays are our Thursdays, and their Mondays are our Sundays. So that was also something to get used to. Like if I need to meet with someone, I have to make sure like it like fits in the middle of the week window, or else it's like their weekend or my weekend. So that's a little weird. But yeah, so that's the day in the life. Or did you want to get granular into what we talk about? Or
Oh no, that's a good high level, and that sounds amazing. Having no meetings until like the afternoon and just being able to focus. But yeah, maybe you could talk like whatever you can talk about. Like, yeah, what are you working on? Like, what's your process like?
So our process, I think this is my first time experiencing what agile really is. So we're doing what basically, I think our team is still learning too. I think this process is also new to PMs and dev, but we're really like working together from like end to end, like discovery to define, like discovery phase to wonder phase to exploration and whatever's down the line. I'm not quite there yet, but we're still stuck in that discovery define phase. And I'm still kind of working, I'm still trying to work it out too. I thought I involved everybody, but apparently I didn't, because one of our developers recently spoke out and said, hey, like, how might we get involved with design more? How might we communicate better with you guys? Could we do whiteboard brainstorming sessions together so that we could help with iteration? Because I'm really afraid, I don't want us to do like the waterfall effect, because I guess he was feeling that it was turning into that, where design kind of goes dark for a couple of days and just works on design and then give them something at the end of the week. So we're trying to prevent that from happening. But yeah, it was like interesting for an engineer to say, hey, like, let me work with you guys more or collaborate with you guys better. So that was cool, because usually from our previous work experience, it's usually like us designers reaching out to engineers, right? Yeah. Did I
Yeah.
answer your question? I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Like
No,
lost
yeah, you
words.
did. Yeah, for people who may not be familiar with agile or waterfall, how would you explain that in your own words? It's fine, just like from your experience.
Sure. Yeah, waterfall is very like um step by step. You know, like when we meet for a team, we meet with the team in a workshop phase. I guess that's when you get the requirements. After you get your requirements, I guess there's some research involved, and then design goes and creates some iterations. Then that fourth step, you involve developers, and that's kind of a problem because um, designers will go off and design, and then you do all this work until developers look at your work and say, hey, this isn't even viable. So you spend all that time working on these feature functions and they can't even build it. So to avoid that from happening, I guess the industry is trying to be more agile by involving all the key stakeholders from the beginning to end. And I'm still trying to figure that out too. And where right now I'm like, I'm not going to be very good at explaining the entire process, because right now we're still just stuck in discovery and defining and just kind of doing a lot of back and forths and brainstorming with each other.
Yeah, but it's more collaborative rather than like people working off on their own. It's like more, the idea is like at different stages to come together and collaborate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, and that's good. And I think it's what people want to be able to do, is like actually communicate with each other so that you're not, yes, wasting time trying to make something that's not possible to do.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in like a general sense, kind of shifting gears to more like the general life area, how has like the pandemic affected what you do for fun and in your life?
Honestly, I'm pretty grateful in the sense that it didn't affect me like really harshly. Um, like I didn't lose my job over it, or I didn't lose a loved one. Like I know a lot of people have suffered in many different ways, and I'm very grateful and blessed that those things didn't happen to me, knock on wood. But what did affect me a little bit was, just not being able to see people, human interaction. But I've come to kind of enjoy isolation a little bit, just kind of finding time to do things that I haven't done in years. like kind of getting back to illustrating, getting back to reading, helping my parents take care of their cats. Now I'm really into plants, so I'm like, that's a really good de-stressor too. I'm like taking care of plants, buying plants and grooming them. But yeah, it hasn't affected me that badly.
Yeah, I was just also kind of thinking about just, yeah, like what you were saying about your routine where you're spending more time doing things like hobbies that you haven't done in a
Mm,
while. Yeah, so it's cool that you're doing plants more. I'm trying to get more interested in that. It's both our friend gave us both plants, and so now I'm like, oh, I just want to expand my collection a bit more. It's fun.
yeah, I think it started with that. Like ever since I moved to an apartment, and then people keep giving me plants as like a housewarming gift, and then it kind of forced me to take care of it. And then taking care of it led to me actually enjoying that kind of as a hobby.
Mhm.
So yeah, I guess I got into it because I was it was just like handed to me.
Yeah, yeah. And talking about moving into an apartment, so it's kind of two things. Like you and your boyfriend Brian, you both recently moved in together officially, just the two of you, and you moved to a different city, San Francisco. So how's that change been?
It's been so much more productive and fun living on your own. We're always doing stuff. We cook a lot more, we clean a lot more, we hike a lot more, we get coffee a lot more, we met a lot of new people, reunited with old friends. We've been discovering delicious and underrated hole in the wall places, restaurants. We've also gotten used to living more minimally. For example, downsizing on things that we own, like clothes and shoes. And I don't know, I guess you could say it's like living a more simple life a little bit, decreasing my carbon footprint.
Yeah, that's always good. Like, is it because you had to move into a smaller space that you were downsizing?
Yes. And I also don't drive anymore.
Mm. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I remember you mentioning that you're taking public transportation more.
Yes, that's right. And God, that's something to get used to. Also with Muni, it's so freaking slow here. Um, I've like missed my stop like 3 times just from like talking with someone on the bus and getting distracted. And God, I waste so much time on public transit. Still trying to get used to it.
It's an adventure for sure. Like yeah, because they're not always announcing the next stop, or because it doesn't just like come up on a screen or something, and or you just have to pay attention.
Right. And sometimes I have my headphones on, which is really stupid. So then I also miss my stop because again, I'm distracted in a different way.
Yeah, I remember learning that you have to push the stop button so they don't just automatically stop where you want them to.
Yeah, I actually learned that from one of like a senior that sat next to me because she's like, "Hey, isn't this your stop? You have to press the button." Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. It's good that you're actually like able to talk to people and stuff because sometimes I feel like it can be hard, like people are so heads down or like on their devices, or so it's nice that you're able to catch up with people and talk to them.
Yeah, especially with things opening up, but then now it kind of seems like that's reverting a little bit, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. So what made you want to move to San Francisco?
Oh, so because my partner Brian got this job and they were saying we're going to open the office in September. So he wanted to prepare for that and move in the summer, expecting to go into the office. But then we moved in and they said they postponed the date, right? But then um, I, this is open information. I could talk about it. Okay. So he works for Afterpay, but 3 weeks ago, Afterpay got acquired by Square. So moving forward, after that acquisition is active, they're going to be working for Square, and Square is work from home forever,
Oh
just like
wow.
Atlassian. So, did we need to move to San Francisco? No.
I just kind of thought you moved there for fun. But so do you think you're going to stay there?
Yes, for at least next 2 years.
2 years is a specific time frame.
You're right. We'll see. Like, I'm curious about other cities too. I've been in California my entire life. So maybe we'll be in Seattle or New York in a couple years. Who knows? Maybe we're back in our parents' house. Oh God, I hope not.
Yeah, talking about your parents and being from California, you grew up in the San Jose area and then you went to college in LA. So you've pretty much been in California your whole life. You moved back to the same area. And is that because you love California so much, or like, yeah, what's kind of kept you in the area? I'm just curious.
Oh man, jobs and family, I would have to say. When graduating college, I had some choices: move up to the Bay because of other job opportunities, or stay in LA also because of job opportunities. Um, and I guess the easy solution was to move up to the Bay because family was there, friends was there, my partner was already working there. Um, so yeah, that I chose to go back. And I
Yeah.
guess it wasn't bad because, I saved up a lot while working, at IBM San Jose, and then just like, living in San Jose.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's really great to be close to family. I definitely like it's a challenge when you're far away from them. Like, so it's really good to be. I definitely see the value of being near family. And oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying, like you just like speaking about your family, you have a really interesting cultural background. You have some Brazilian in there and Taiwanese, and I just like curious about, I guess I'm just generally curious now that like, so I've married an immigrant and like so he's Serbian from another country and now like kind of like mixing of cultures is really interesting to me, like especially it's always been interesting but like more especially interesting to me, so I'm curious to know like some of the things your family does to preserve like your heritage.
Food. My mom is subscribed to 4 or 5 different food delivery services. Most of them are Asian food delivery apps, and they connect consumers to kitchens or mom and pa's restaurants that are much farther away than, DoorDash limits it to 5 miles. But so she's always on the hunt for the most authentic Taiwanese food that we can find in the Bay Area. So she's constantly ordering food and trying food from like new Taiwanese establishments. Now, to find Brazilian food is a lot harder in the Bay Area. So she's been always like hunting for Brazilian individuals on Instagram because there's a lot of, you know, businesses on Instagram now. And so she was able to find some Brazilian chefs that specializes in specific traditional dishes or street foods, and she would pre-order from them and make a relationship with them. So yeah, that's how we're preserving the two cultures.
That's fun. Well, and like food is like the great unifier of people.
There you go. No better way
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah. And could you remind me again what that like Brazilian connection is?
um, okay, so disclaimer, I don't actually have Brazilian in my blood, but the story is my parents were both born in Taiwan, but they were raised in Brazil. So they were both immigrants of Taiwan. And yeah, they moved to Brazil at a very, very young age and ended up meeting there.
That's so cool. Like, yeah, both being from Taiwan, but then meeting in Brazil and now they're in California. What how they decide to come to California?
My dad got a scholarship to UT Austin. And yeah, so the dream was always to go to the States, but back then it was not easy. So Brazil was like the second best option, apparently, because they couldn't get into the United States. So yeah, he went. So my dad went first because he went there for college. Um, yeah, and then he was planning on moving back to Brazil to take over the family business. But when he went back to visit, some shady stuff happened at the airport. He was trying to check in his computer, but then the Brazilian staff at the airline was like, "Oh, you can't take this in. Sorry." And so he was like, "Wait, what? Like my whole life is on this computer." And so then he ended up having to bribe them, like basically buy his computer back to get through security. Yeah. So then that was one red flag. I was like, oh my God, I forgot how shady Brazil was. Then he gets back home and there was a trash strike where the the dumpster, like for waste management, the people who work in waste management, they weren't getting paid as much as they wanted to, so they had a strike. So on the street, it was filled with trash because no one's trash was getting picked up for weeks. So it was just smelling like poop everywhere.
Oh, wow.
So as soon as he got home, it was trashy, and he was like, "Wow, I don't want my kids living here and growing up here." So that was a moment where he was like, "Nope, I'm going back to the States, and I'm gonna marry Sarah, my soon-to-be wife, and have my kids grow up in the States."
Wow, that is, yeah, quite the story. So I'm guessing he found a job in San Jose or something.
Funny enough, he really wanted to get into IBM because it was booming at the time. But IBM, I guess, didn't take immigrants or something like that. So yeah, he was working for some startups for a while. Eventually, became an entrepreneur himself. Yes. So I hope you don't have a lot of Brazilian viewers because I don't mean to trash the country. It's beautiful. I loved traveling there as a kid, but that was just part of my dad's experience.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I mean, there's good and bad to everywhere, for sure. Yeah, and I'm just curious about with Brian, your partner, and I know you spent a lot of time with his family. Do they have different traditions than your family?
Oh, yeah, they don't eat out. They just cook at home. His family was definitely more frugal than my family too. For example, I grew up with a lot more than he did. Typically, every birthday, Christmas, you get presents. Every Chinese New Year, you get money. He didn't have any of that growing up, and it's not because they're poor. It was just their decision.
Yeah.
So he'd always make fun of me for growing up spoiled when I just kind of thought it was the norm.
Hmm. Yeah, it is interesting when you're like when you interact with other people's families and you're like, oh, you do something like way different than I do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think getting to like relationship stuff, I think one of the obstacles of like growing together was kind of accepting different family education instead of judging.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And then you have to decide like what values you want to carry on with your own family. Or I mean, I'm not
mhm.
not assuming, yeah, just like with your own relationship and family and unit in that sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I don't know if you've talked about that or thought about it, but yeah, I'm just curious like if there's like certain family traditions you want to carry on.
So, speaking from my family, I never saw us as the most traditional. Um, but they do want me to get married and have kids as soon as possible. I'm at the age where my mom already had 2 kids. So that's something
Yeah.
that she keeps reminding me about. But I'm sorry, that's not happening anytime
Mhm.
soon. So as far as carry on family traditions, no offense, that's just not on my priority right now.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, totally get it. Yeah, it's like interesting what people like define as family traditions. Like I was thinking about like, okay, with like my husband, they have different holidays. Like
Hmm.
they follow like a different um religious calendar in their country because they're Orthodox Christians. And so in the Orthodox calendar, the Easter and Christmas are like a couple weeks later. And then there's also every family has like a family saint. So then you have you celebrate that family saint. It's like it's called Slava, and it's a holiday that you have. So I'm kind of like, ooh, we get to have 2 Christmas, 2 Easters, and like we have this family holiday now that we can do. So I just think it's, I mean, and those are kind of like just simple examples of things, but it's just like, oh, more just different things that you can incorporate or traditions.
I love that. Okay. Family holidays. Yes, I thank you for that example. Yeah, like for I guess for Chinese people, we have Chinese New Year, we have like Moon Festival or Autumn's Festival or like a separate Father's Day and a separate Mother's Day from the American holidays. So if we continue the Chinese traditions like the American traditions, yes, we get 2 Chinese New Year's, 2 Mother's Day, 2 Father's Day, and yeah, some unique holidays that, is filled with just food, money, presents. So yeah, I guess that's, like you said, a really great benefit for it being multicultural.
Yeah. Um, I know with when I lived in Spain, the Valentine's Day tradition, or might not have been Valentine's Day, but it was like some other like kind of love holiday that they had, where it was this tradition where like women would give men chocolates and then men would give women books, which I thought was super cool because I love books. I'm like, yes, give me all the books. But I'm kind of curious, like, are there different, like, I guess like for Chinese New Year's, what are the differences in the celebrations that you do in like Chinese New Year versus like I guess American New Year? I don't know how to say that.
That's a good question. For American New Year's, I hear a lot of family go all out and they like watch, the Times Square and everything. But for our family, we just get together and we have dinner. But then we go pretty big on Chinese New Year, where it's dinner and you're dressed in red and you decorate the house in red and a bunch of Chinese characters flying everywhere, and then you pass out a bunch of red envelopes filled with cash. So I guess we don't. I guess we take the American one lightly, but then we do have, I guess, traditions with friends where we do like a barbecue or we drink to midnight. Um, so yeah, I think American New Year's is more appreciated among like friend groups that we grew up together, that, because we're like American, but yeah, with the family it's a little different.
Yeah, I'd love to know a bit more about some of the other holidays you mentioned too, like did you say autumn festival or like what are some of those?
Man, I'm really bad. I'm like showing you how non-traditional, or I'm like lacking in my own heritage sometimes, but I don't remember if Moon Festival or Autumn Festival are the same thing. But like for Moon Festival, I guess we were celebrating like the new moon or something, and that's supposed to mean something. But we pass out moon cakes
I
and you eat
remember
moon
that,
cakes.
and I think we had that in the San Jose office one time. They celebrated
Yeah,
that, and we had mooncakes.
there you go.
Yeah,
That,
cool.
and we had tea and moon cakes. And I remember, I don't know if you remember, but I there's like all these different types of moon cakes, especially depending on what region of China you're from, or Taiwan, or even Vietnam. Um, but I gave you a specific moon cake, and there was like a stamp on it, and it was actually savory and sweet. Do you remember that?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was kind of me trying to give you a taste of my culture, even though I probably need to learn more about it myself.
Oh, yeah, and I know. So, what are some of the things you do? I remember in our newsletter for the IBM office, when you were interviewed, you talked about what you do to stay inspired, and so I'd love to like hear about that again, like around the show.
Sure, yeah. Um, Lately, it's all been just watching stuff on Netflix, Hulu, and HBO. Um, and also like listening to podcasts sometimes. Yeah, like I think in the newsletter I mentioned lots of my inspiration would come from like sci-fi and like competition shows like Project Runway, Face Off, Interior Design Masters, and you get to see how creative people can get in such a short amount of time. And I'm constantly inspired by these artists, and and I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, if I'm in that position and I have 2 days to create this ball gown, I don't even know what to do. So it's really cool to see people's process filmed, and then the outcome, and obviously all the sweat, blood, and tears that go into it, because that also reminds me of what I had to go through in art school.
Yeah, that's cool. And yeah, so what's your favorite thing you've watched recently?
Ooh, Warrior on HBO. The script was partially written by Bruce Lee. It's a crime drama that takes place in San Francisco Chinatown during the California Gold Rush. So Americans ship a bunch of Chinese immigrants overseas to, of course, build their railroad for very, very low wage. They get promised the American dream, but you get to see the characters dealing with violence, brutality, the racism, sex trafficking. But it's mainly about the conflicts among Chinese gangs that formed in Chinatown within that time. And you also see how the conflicts within the Irish community, and then like the Irish versus the Chinese, because the Irish are complaining that the Chinese people are taking their jobs and stuff. It really overlaps with the history of what actually happened in late 19th century.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I read this book kind of set around in the same time period. That's like a fantasy book where this young woman can see, and I don't know, can see into this other dimension, and it had a lot of like Chinese lore and mythology. Like she could see a lot of like some of the, I guess, traditional deities and monsters and spirits and that kind of thing. And I thought it was cool. But what I liked about it too was like kind of the realistic dynamics between it was also set in the Chinatown and the Gold Rush, and seeing kind of like that insular community they had, but then when they had to like interact with other groups, and they had like kind of like sort of a gang sort of concept too, and that was really interesting. So yeah, that sounds like a great recommendation. I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, I think you'll definitely like it, because I know you really appreciate like American history too, or European history, and that just, yeah, it was a kind of a good way to learn about kind of sort of my heritage. Like these people came from a specific part of China, which I'm pretty sure I don't have family there, but it was I still would associate myself with, the mainland Chinese too. Not to get into the politics, but it was like emotional for me, to see them go through that terrible time during that time of history. So like I still felt connected to them.
Yeah, and it's good to I guess see that and really understand some more of that context, like because you'll walk around Chinatown and you're like, oh yeah, there's like a lot of Chinese people who live there, but there's really like a whole like reason why it was Chinatown in the first place, and it's yeah.
Exactly. There was lots of sweat and lots of blood to
Yeah.
get there.
Oh,
But yeah, definitely I recommend it. It's so good, and I'm waiting for season 3.
season 3.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, it's been really great catching up with you, Natasha. Thanks for coming on my show. And yeah, it was really, really fun.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope I haven't bored any of you. But yeah, again, I really enjoyed talking to you in general.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a single show. Interested in being on the show? Know someone that might be a good fit? Use the nomination form in the description.